The Stranger Who Knew My Name Before We Met. Chapter 1. The Man Who Said My Name. The first time a stranger said my name, I thought he had mistaken me for someone else. It was a Tuesday evening in October, the kind of October that made Chicago look almost beautiful enough to forgive it for winter. I had just finished a 12-hour shift at the hospital and was standing outside a little coffee shop on North Clark Street, trying to decide whether I was too tired to walk home. But I was also too tired to wait 20 minutes for a rideshare. So I stood beneath the awning, holding a paper cup of coffee I didn't really want, watching headlights smear across the wet pavement. Rain had started about an hour earlier. Not the dramatic kind, just a steady, cold drizzle that made everyone walk faster and look miserable. I was halfway through checking my phone when I heard a man's voice behind me. "You're going to miss your train, Emma." I froze. Not because of what he said, because of my name. Emma, my actual name. I turned around. The man standing behind me looked to be somewhere around 30, maybe 32. Dark brown hair, slightly damp from the rain. Gray wool coat, no umbrella. His face was unfamiliar, completely unfamiliar. And yet there was something strange about the way he was looking at me. Not like a stranger meeting someone for the first time, like someone who had been waiting. I stared at him. He stared back. Then he smiled. It wasn't a creepy smile. That almost would have been easier. It was warm, familiar, the kind of smile a person gives someone they've known for years. "Sorry," he said. "I thought you were someone else." I swallowed. "You know my name?" His smile disappeared. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then he glanced toward the street. "You should go." My stomach tightened. "Excuse me?" "The train." I looked at my phone. The screen showed 7:42 p.m. My train left at 7:48. I looked back at him. "How do you know which train I'm taking?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped away from the awning. Rain immediately darkened his coat. "Wait." He stopped. I don't know why I said it. Maybe because I was curious. Maybe because I was exhausted. Or maybe because something about him felt wrong in a way that made me want answers. "Have we met before?" He slowly turned. For the first time, I noticed his eyes. Blue. Not bright blue. A muted gray blue, like the sky after a storm. And something in them made my chest ache. "No," he said. The answer came too quickly. I frowned. "Then how do you know my name?" He looked at me for several seconds. Then he said something I'll remember for the rest of my life. "Because you told me." I actually laughed. It was nervous and confused. The kind of laugh that escapes when your brain can't figure out what else to do. "When?" He looked down at the sidewalk. "Not yet." The rain seemed suddenly louder. I stopped breathing for a second. "What does that mean?" He backed away. "Emma, listen to me." My name again. This time it didn't sound like a mistake. It sounded like a warning. "Don't take the train tonight." I stared at him. "Why?" His jaw tightened. "I can't explain it here." "Then explain it somewhere else." He shook his head. "Not tonight." He turned. I stepped forward. "Hey!" He kept walking. I followed him onto the sidewalk. "Wait!" People moved between us, umbrellas opening and closing like dark flowers. I lost sight of him for maybe 3 seconds. When I reached the corner, he was gone. Completely gone. I looked down the street. Nothing. I checked the side streets. Nothing. It was as if the man had dissolved into the rain. I stood there, confused, irritated, and increasingly uncomfortable. Then I heard the familiar metallic screech of a train arriving underground. My train. 7:48. I looked toward the station entrance. Then back at the street where the stranger had disappeared. "Don't take the train tonight." It was ridiculous. Obviously ridiculous. I didn't know this man. He could have been a stalker, a lunatic, someone who had somehow seen my name on my hospital badge. Although my badge was tucked inside my coat, I hadn't shown it to him. Still, there were 100 explanations. There always are. That's what we tell ourselves when something impossible happens. We find an explanation because the alternative is too frightening. I went down into the station. The platform was crowded. I stood near the yellow line, checking the time. 7:51. The train was late. I remember being annoyed about it. I remember thinking the stranger had probably known the schedule because he was a regular commuter. I remember telling myself that everything was fine. Then the lights flickered. Once, twice. The entire platform went dark. People groaned. Someone laughed. A child began crying. Then, somewhere inside the tunnel, I heard a deep metallic boom. The lights came back, and everyone on the platform looked toward the tracks. A train was approaching. Too fast. Much too fast. The warning bells began screaming. People stepped backward. The train entered the station and slammed into the emergency brakes. Metal shrieked. Sparks exploded beneath the wheels. Someone screamed. The train stopped only a few feet beyond where I had been standing. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then the platform erupted into noise. Transit employees rushed toward the train. People called 911. A woman was crying. A man kept saying, "Oh my God!" I couldn't move. I was staring at the tracks. My heart was pounding so hard that I could hear it. I didn't know what had happened. Later, the news would say there had been a mechanical failure. Later, they would say the operator had reacted quickly. Later, everyone would call it a near miss. But that wasn't what terrified me. What terrified me was the realization that if I had arrived on time, I would have been standing directly in front of that train. I slowly pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking. There were no messages, no missed calls, nothing. I looked at the time, 7:56, and then I noticed something. A notification had appeared on my lock screen. It wasn't from a number I recognized. It was a text message. The sender was listed as unknown. I opened it. There were only 6 words. "I told you not to take it." My blood went cold. I looked around the platform. Hundreds of people were moving around me, but somehow I felt completely alone. I typed, "Who are you?" The message showed 1 check mark, then 2. He was reading it. I typed again, "How do you know my name?" 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, appeared again. Then the answer arrived. "Because I know how this ends." I stared at those words until they blurred. Another message came through, and Emma, the typing indicator, returned. This time it stayed there for almost 10 seconds. Then, "You need to find me before Friday." I looked at the date. Tuesday, October 14th. Friday was 3 days away. I typed the only question I could think of. "Why?" His response came immediately. "Because on Friday you meet me for the first time." I read it once, then twice, then a third time. A cold sensation moved slowly down my spine. Because I had already met him. Hadn't I? I stood in the middle of the crowded train station, staring at the message. And somewhere deep inside me, beneath the fear and confusion, another feeling appeared. Recognition. Not of his face, not of his voice. Something smaller, something stranger. The feeling that I had been waiting for him too. Even though I had no idea who he was. Even though I couldn't remember ever seeing him before. And even though he had looked directly into my eyes and told me something impossible. We hadn't met yet. But somehow, he already knew my name. Chapter 2. The Photograph. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay in bed until 2 in the morning. Then 3. Then nearly 4. Staring at the ceiling of my apartment while the stranger's words replayed in my head. Because I know how this ends. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him standing beneath the coffee shop awning. Gray coat, wet hair, those impossible gray-blue eyes. And that expression. Not fear, not excitement. Recognition. Like he had seen me 1,000 times before. At 4:17 a.m., I finally got out of bed and made coffee. I stood barefoot in my kitchen, staring through the window at the city. Chicago was quiet from this high up. Not silent. The city was never silent. There was always a siren somewhere. Car passing. The distant rumble of the L. Someone laughing on a sidewalk far below. Usually, those sounds made me feel less alone. That morning, they didn't. My phone sat on the counter. I had read the messages so many times that I knew them by heart. "I told you not to take it. Because I know how this ends. You need to find me before Friday." Because on Friday you meet me for the first time. The last message bothered me most. Not because it was impossible. Because of the wording. He hadn't said, "You'll meet me again." He said, "You meet me for the first time." As if the man outside the coffee shop wasn't the beginning. As if he was somehow standing outside the timeline I understood. I picked up my phone. There was no new message. I opened the contact information. Nothing. No number. No profile photo. Just unknown. I tried calling. The call immediately failed. I tried again. Same thing. Then I did something that made me feel stupid the moment I did it. I searched the internet for phrases from his messages. Nothing useful. Of course there wasn't. There were thousands of people talking about strange encounters, premonitions, near-death experiences, coincidences. But none of them explained how a stranger could know my name before we'd supposedly met. At 5:03 a.m., I searched something else. My own name, Emma Carter, Chicago. The results were ordinary. A LinkedIn profile, a few old social media accounts, a hospital staff directory that I couldn't access without logging in. Nothing strange. Nothing that explained him. I shut my phone off. That's when I noticed the envelope. It was sitting on my kitchen table. I hadn't seen it before. I stopped moving. The envelope was cream-colored. No stamp. No address. My name was written across the front. Emma Carter. I stared at it. I lived alone. The door had been locked. I hadn't heard anyone enter. Slowly, I walked toward the table. My fingers felt numb as I picked it up. There was something inside. A photograph. I pulled it out, and everything inside me went still. It was a picture of me, not a picture I recognized. I was standing beside a lake, wearing a dark green sweater and jeans. My hair was longer than it was now. I was smiling, not the polite smile I used at work, not the exhausted smile I gave friends when I was pretending I wasn't tired. This was a genuine smile, the kind I hadn't seen on my own face in years. I looked happy, but I wasn't alone. The man from the coffee shop stood beside me. His arm was around my waist. My head rested against his shoulder, and I was looking at him like I loved him. I dropped the photograph. It landed face up on the floor. For several seconds, I couldn't breathe. Then I crouched down and picked it up again. I turned it over. There was writing on the back. Lake Geneva, October 17th. Below that was another sentence. You won't remember this until you're ready. My hands began shaking. October 17th. Friday. 3 days away. I checked the calendar on my phone. October 14th. Tuesday. I looked back at the photograph. The date was 3 days in the future. That wasn't possible. It had to be edited. Some kind of elaborate prank. Maybe someone had found pictures of me online and created this. But the photograph looked old. Not digitally old. Physically old. The corners were worn. There was a faint crease running diagonally across the bottom. And there was something else. A tiny red mark in the lower right corner. A coffee stain. I knew that stain, because I had seen it before. On photographs my mother kept in an old box. My mother. The thought came suddenly. I grabbed my phone and called her. She answered on the fourth ring. Emma? Her voice was sleepy. Mom. Did you ever take me to Lake Geneva? Silence. Then, why? My heart began beating faster. Just answer me. Another pause. Yes. I sat down. When? Emma. It's 5 in the morning. When? She sighed. I don't know. You were little. No. I mean recently. Nothing. I stared at the photograph. Mom, why are you asking me this? Have I been to Lake Geneva as an adult? She didn't answer. That was answer enough. Mom, Emma, we should talk about this when you've had some sleep. Did I go there with Dad? Silence. My father's name was something we rarely said anymore. He had died when I was 22. A heart attack. Sudden. Unexpected. At least, that's what I'd always been told. Mom, did Dad take me to Lake Geneva? Her voice changed. Where did you get that name? I stood. That's not an answer. Emma, where did you get it? Mom. She breathed out slowly. Then she said, "Your father took you there once." My mouth went dry. When? I don't remember. You do remember. Emma. Was I alone with him? Another pause. Yes. I stared at the photograph. The man beside me was definitely not my father. Was anyone else there? My mother didn't respond. I felt something crack open inside my chest. Mom. Finally, she said, very quietly, "Don't go there." I closed my eyes. The exact same warning. Why? Because some places are better left in the past. Mom, I have a picture. What picture? I looked at the man beside me. Of me. Silence. With someone. My mother's breathing changed. Who? I don't know. Emma, listen to me. She sounded frightened now. Not annoyed. Not confused. Frightened. Throw the photograph away. I stared at it. Why? Because whoever gave you that picture doesn't want you to remember. My stomach tightened. Remember what? My mother didn't answer. Then the line went dead. I called back. Straight to voicemail. Again. Voicemail. I looked at the clock. 5:21 a.m. My apartment suddenly felt unfamiliar. I walked to the front door and checked the lock. Still locked. The deadbolt was still engaged. There was no sign anyone had entered. I returned to the kitchen. The photograph was still in my hand. I examined it again. The background was unmistakable. Lake Geneva. I had been there once. At least I thought I had. A school trip when I was 17. That was the only memory I had. But the photograph wasn't from that trip. And I knew why. The woman in the picture had the same small scar above her left eyebrow that I had. The same silver necklace I was wearing now. Even the tiny crescent-shaped birthmark near my wrist was visible. It was me. There was no question. I turned the photograph over again. The writing suddenly seemed different. Not because the words had changed. Because I noticed something beneath them. Very faintly, almost hidden beneath the paper fibers, was another line. I tilted the photograph toward the kitchen light. Letters emerged. I read them slowly. If you're reading this before October 17th, don't trust the man who finds you. My heart stopped. I read it again. Then again. The photograph trembled between my fingers. The man outside the coffee shop had told me to find him before Friday. The photograph told me not to trust him. And my mother had told me not to go to Lake Geneva. 3 warnings. 3 different directions. I didn't know which one to follow. Then my phone vibrated. I nearly dropped the photograph. A new text. Unknown. I opened it. You found the picture. My fingers went cold. I typed, "How did you get into my apartment?" The answer appeared immediately. I didn't. I stared at the screen. Another message. "You left it there." I felt my stomach drop. I typed, "I've never seen that picture before." 3 dots. Then, "That's what you said last time." I couldn't move. Another message appeared. "Emma, please." Then, "Don't go to Lake Geneva alone." I stared at the screen. My fear was slowly being replaced by something else. Anger. I typed, "Who are you?" This time, the reply took longer. Nearly a minute. Then, "Someone who loved you once." My throat tightened. Before I could respond, another message arrived. "Someone who will love you again." And then the final message. "If you let me." I stared at those words. Outside, the first pale light of morning began spreading between the buildings. And for the first time since the stranger appeared, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't only afraid of meeting him. Part of me was afraid that I already loved him. I just couldn't remember why. Chapter 3. The Name in the Old Notebook. By 6:30 that morning, I had made a decision. I was going to find out who he was. Not because I trusted him. I didn't. Not because I believed the impossible things he'd told me. I didn't. And definitely not because of the photograph. That picture had turned my entire understanding of my own life upside down. I was going to find him because I was tired of being afraid of a man who seemed to know more about me than I knew about myself. I showered, changed clothes, and went to work. For the first few hours, I almost managed to pretend everything was normal. Almost. I worked in the emergency department at St. Catherine's, where normal was already a relative concept. By 8:15, I'd helped with a broken wrist, a kitchen accident, 2 cases of food poisoning, and a college student who had apparently decided that 4 energy drinks in 90 minutes was a reasonable life choice. The ordinary chaos helped. It gave my brain something else to do. Then my coworker Jenna walked up beside me. She looked at my face. "You look terrible. Good morning to you too. I'm serious. I didn't sleep. Again." I gave her a look. She raised both hands. "Okay, not my business." I turned back toward the computer. Then she noticed the photograph sticking out of my jacket pocket. "What's that?" "Nothing. That's a photograph." "Thank you, detective." She pulled up a chair. "Okay, now I definitely want to know." I hesitated. Jenna had been my closest friend for almost 4 years. She knew most things about me. Not everything. Nobody knew everything. But enough. I pulled the photograph out. She looked at it. Her expression changed. "Emma." "Yeah." "Who is that?" "I don't know." She looked at me, then back at the photograph. "That's you." "I know." "Where is this?" "Lake Geneva." Her eyebrows rose. "Okay. And I don't remember taking it." She looked at me carefully. "Are you sure?" "Jenna." "Okay. Sorry." She studied the picture again. "Who's the guy?" "I don't know." "He looks familiar." My heart skipped. "What?" She shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe I've seen him somewhere." "Where?" "Emma." I said maybe. I took the picture back. Then I noticed something. The photograph had a date written on the back. October 17th. Jenna saw my expression. "What?" "Nothing." "You're doing the face." "What face?" "The face you make when you're about to tell me something insane." I slipped the photograph into my pocket. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Have you ever heard of someone named Daniel?" Her expression changed. Just slightly, but I saw it. "Daniel who?" "I don't know." She stared at me. "Why?" "I had a dream." That was a lie. A bad one. She knew it. "You don't look like someone who had a dream." "What do I look like?" "Someone who found a dead body." "Helpful." She leaned closer. "Emma, what's going on?" Before I could answer, a nurse called her from across the station. Jenna stood. "Tonight." "What?" "You tell me tonight." Then she walked away. I watched her go. Something about her reaction bothered me. But I had no time to think about it. The emergency department got busy again. I spent the next 6 hours trying to forget everything. By 3 in the afternoon, I almost succeeded. Then I walked into the staff break room and found a small brown envelope sitting on the table. My name was written across it. Emma Carter. My heart dropped. I looked around. Nobody was there. I didn't touch it. I called Jenna. No answer. I looked through the narrow window in the door. A nurse passed by. Then another. Everything looked normal. I picked up the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper. 3 words. "Ask your mother." I stared at it. Underneath was a date. October 17th, 2014. I read it twice. 10 years ago. I immediately called my mother. She didn't answer. Again. Voicemail. I sent a text. "Mom, call me. It's important." Then I looked at the date again. October 17th, 2014. I knew that date. I knew it without knowing why. I opened my phone and searched my old photographs. Nothing. I searched my messages. Nothing. Then I remembered something. My father's old house. After he died, my mother had packed almost everything into storage. Boxes of photographs, books, documents, things neither of us could bring ourselves to throw away. There was one box in particular I'd never opened. My father's notebooks. He had been an architect. He kept notes about everything. Measurements, buildings, addresses, ideas, even grocery lists. When I was a kid, I used to steal his notebooks and draw little houses in the margins. After his death, my mother had told me not to touch them. I suddenly understood why. I left work early. The storage facility was 20 minutes away. The October sky had turned gray by the time I arrived. I found the unit and unlocked it. Boxes were stacked almost to the ceiling. I searched for nearly half an hour. Then I found them. 3 black notebooks. My father's handwriting was unmistakable. I sat on the concrete floor and opened the first one. Architectural sketches. The second, more sketches. The third, mostly personal notes. I flipped through pages quickly. Then I stopped. October 17th, 2014. My father's handwriting covered half the page. I read it. Emma met Daniel today. My heart began pounding. I turned the page. Nothing. I went back. Read it again. Emma met Daniel today. Daniel. The name Jenna had reacted to. The name the stranger had never given me. I kept reading. She doesn't remember him yet. My hands went cold. I turned the page. I don't think she should. Another page. If anything happens to me, Helen must keep Emma away from him. Helen. My mother's name. I stopped breathing. My father knew. He knew about the man. He knew about Daniel. And apparently he believed Daniel was dangerous. I flipped through the notebook faster. Several pages had been torn out. Not accidentally. Someone had ripped them from the binding. I looked at the remaining pages. The next entry was dated October 19th. Daniel came back. Then, he says he remembers everything. Then, I don't believe him. My hands were trembling. I turned the page. Only one sentence. He says Emma will forget me before she forgets him. I stared at it. The words made no sense. My father had died 8 years ago. But the date was 10 years ago. Why was he writing about my memory? I turned another page. Blank. Another. Blank. Then, near the back of the notebook, I found something that made my heart stop. A photograph. It was old and faded. My father stood beside a lake. I was standing next to him. I looked about 17. And beside me was a boy. I stared at his face. My breathing became shallow. He wasn't the man from the coffee shop. Not exactly. He looked younger. Much younger. But the eyes were the same. Gray-blue. I turned the photograph over. There was writing. Emma and Daniel. Lake Geneva. October 17th, 2014. My fingers tightened around the paper. I remembered the lake. I remembered my father. I remembered the cold air. But I didn't remember Daniel. Not even a little. Then something fell from between the pages of the notebook. A small folded piece of paper. I opened it. My father's handwriting. If Emma ever asks about Daniel, tell her the truth. I swallowed. Below it, another sentence had been written in different handwriting. A handwriting I didn't recognize. She'll ask when she sees the photograph. I froze. That couldn't be possible. The note had been inside my father's notebook for 10 years. Unless, I turned the paper over. There was one final line. And when she does, don't let her go to the lake on October 17th. My phone vibrated. I almost screamed. I looked at the screen. Unknown. One message. You found your father's notebook. I didn't respond. Another message arrived. Now you know why your mother was afraid. I typed. Are you Daniel? The typing indicator appeared. Then disappeared. Then appeared again. Finally, yes. My heart slammed against my ribs. I stared at the name. Daniel. The name my father had written. The boy in the photograph. The stranger who had found me before we'd supposedly met. I typed, what happened on October 17th, 2014? His answer came quickly. You died. I stared at the screen. My fingers went numb. Then another message arrived. And I was the reason you came back. Couldn't breathe. Before I could type another word, my phone rang. It wasn't Daniel. It was my mother. I answered immediately. Mom. She didn't speak. I could hear her breathing. Mom. I found Dad's notebook. Silence. Mom. Finally, she whispered, where are you? At Dad's storage unit. Her voice broke. Emma. Listen to me carefully. I stood. What? Leave. Why? Don't take the notebook. I looked down at it. Mom. What happened to Daniel? She didn't answer. Mom. Her breathing became uneven. Then she said something that made every hair on my arms rise. Daniel isn't the man you should be afraid of. I stared into the empty storage unit. Then who should I be afraid of? There was a long silence. Then my mother whispered, "Your father." The call ended, and somewhere behind me, between the rows of storage units, something moved. I turned. Nothing. Just a narrow corridor. Dark. Empty. I grabbed the notebook and ran. I didn't stop until I reached my car. I locked the doors. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely start the engine. Then I looked at the passenger seat. There was another envelope sitting there. I knew immediately that it hadn't been there before. My name was written on the front. This time, underneath it, someone had written 4 additional words. "You were never supposed to remember." I stared at the envelope. Then my phone buzzed. Another message from Daniel. "Emma, don't open it." I looked at the envelope, then at his message. For the first time, I realized something. Daniel wasn't the only person watching me. Someone else had been waiting for me to remember, and they were getting impatient. Chapter 4: What My Father Hid. I didn't open the envelope. For once in my life, I listened to the warning. I put it in the glove compartment, locked it, and drove home with both hands gripping the steering wheel. I kept checking the rearview mirror. A black SUV followed me for 6 blocks. Then it turned. A blue sedan appeared behind me. Then it disappeared too. Every car became suspicious. Every pedestrian became someone watching me. By the time I reached my apartment, I was exhausted enough to question whether any of this was actually happening. I parked underground. Before getting out, I sat in the driver's seat for almost 5 minutes. The parking garage hummed around me. Concrete pillars, fluorescent lights, the distant sound of an elevator. I took out my father's notebook. The cover was worn and cracked. I ran my thumb across it. My father had held this thing hundreds of times, maybe thousands, and somewhere inside it was an explanation for why my mother was terrified of a man named Daniel, or why Daniel believed I had died, or why I apparently knew him 10 years ago and had somehow forgotten. I took the notebook upstairs. My apartment felt different when I entered. Too quiet. I locked the door behind me, then the deadbolt. Then I checked the windows. All locked. I placed the notebook on the kitchen table. The envelope remained in my glove compartment downstairs. I wasn't ready for it. I opened the notebook again. Most of the pages were architectural drawings, buildings, bridges, floor plans, but occasionally my father's handwriting shifted. The clean professional notes disappeared. The letters became rushed, uneven, almost frantic. I found another entry dated October 20th, 2014. She doesn't remember the accident. My heart skipped. Accident? I read the next line. Helen says this is a blessing. I don't agree. Then, Daniel keeps asking to see her. Next page. I told him no. Next. He won't accept it. Next. He says Emma deserves to know what happened. I turned another page. Nothing. Another. Nothing. Then a page near the back. October 24th. Only one sentence. I saw Daniel outside the house tonight. The next line had been crossed out. I tilted the notebook toward the light. I could still make out some of the writing beneath the ink. He says he didn't cause the accident. I stopped. Accident. Daniel. My father. My mother. Everything seemed to circle around one event. An event I couldn't remember. I grabbed my phone and searched for local newspaper archives. I typed, October 17th, 2014 Lake Geneva accident Emma Carter. The search results appeared. My heart started beating faster. Nothing. I tried different combinations. Lake Geneva, October 17th, 2014 accident teenager. There were several articles. A boating accident. A car crash. A missing hiker. None involved me. I tried my father's name. Richard Carter, Lake Geneva, 2014. Nothing. Then I tried Daniel. I didn't know his last name. I typed, Daniel, Lake Geneva, October 2014 accident. Nothing useful. I leaned back. Maybe Daniel had lied. Maybe none of it was true. Maybe the photograph was fabricated. Maybe my father's notebook had nothing to do with what happened. Then I remembered my mother's voice. Your father. Not Daniel. My father was the person she told me to fear. Why? I called her again. No answer. I called 5 minutes later. Still nothing. I texted, "Mom, I'm not going anywhere until you tell me what happened." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. I waited. Nothing. I sent another message. "Who is Daniel?" This time she answered, "Don't contact him." I stared at the message. I typed, "Why?" Her response came almost immediately, "Because he was there when your father died." I stopped. My father had died in 2018, not 2014. I typed, "What does that mean?" No response. I called. Nothing. Then another message arrived. "Please trust me." I looked at those 3 words. It was the wrong thing to say, because suddenly I didn't trust her either. I opened my laptop. If my mother wouldn't tell me, I would find out myself. I searched public records. Nothing. Then I searched old news archives. I spent nearly an hour going through articles from October 2014. Finally, I found something. A tiny local newspaper article. No photograph. No dramatic headline. Just a few paragraphs. Local teen recovering after lake incident. I clicked. The article was dated October 18th, 2014. My stomach tightened. The first paragraph said a 17-year-old girl had been hospitalized following an accident near Lake Geneva. The girl's name was not mentioned. The article said she'd been found unconscious near the shoreline. A man had pulled her from the water. The man was not identified. I read the article again. Then I saw the final paragraph. Authorities have not determined how the girl entered the water. Witnesses reported seeing a vehicle leave the area shortly before emergency services arrived. I stared at the screen. A vehicle. Someone had been there. I searched the date. Then I searched the hospital. The article mentioned the girl had been transported to a hospital in Milwaukee. I searched the hospital's archived records. Nothing accessible. Then I remembered something. My medical records. I had been hospitalized when I was 17. My mother had always told me I'd fallen off a dock. That was all I remembered. A fall. Cold water. My father's hand pulling me out. But now I wasn't sure whether any of that memory was real. I stood up. I needed air. I walked toward the window. That's when I saw him. Across the street. Daniel. He was standing beneath a streetlight. Gray coat. Hands in his pockets. Looking directly at my apartment. My heart slammed against my ribs. I stepped away from the window. He shouldn't know where I lived. I grabbed my phone. A message from him appeared. "Don't be afraid." I looked back outside. He was still there. Another message. "I'm not going to come inside." I typed, "How do you know where I live?" He answered, "Because I helped you move in." I froze. Another message. "You hated the blue walls." I looked around my apartment. The walls were blue. I painted them myself 3 years ago. I typed, "How could you know that?" He didn't answer. I looked outside again. He was gone. I ran to the window. Nothing. No Daniel. No gray coat. Just traffic. Then my phone buzzed. A photograph. I opened it. It showed me standing inside this exact apartment. 3 years ago, I was holding a paintbrush. Beside me stood Daniel. Older than the boy in my father's photograph. Younger than the stranger I'd met 2 nights ago, but unmistakably him. My mouth went dry. There was writing beneath the photograph. "You asked me to paint the walls blue." I stared at the image. Then something happened. A memory surfaced. Not a thought. Not imagination. A memory. I was standing in this room. Daniel was beside me. He was laughing. I had paint on my cheek. And I remember saying, "Blue. Definitely blue." Then the memory vanished. I grabbed the edge of the table. My knees nearly gave out. I remembered him, just for a second. But I remembered. My phone rang. I looked at the screen. "Daniel." I answered. Neither of us spoke. Finally, I said, "How long have I known you?" His breathing changed. "Emma. Tell me." Silence. 10 years. Longer. I closed my eyes. "How long?" "Since we were 17. My throat tightened. "And I loved you?" He didn't answer. That was answer enough. I whispered, "What happened?" Daniel was quiet for several seconds. Then, "You died." My eyes opened. "No, you did. People don't just die and come back." "I know." "Then explain it." "I've been trying to. Try harder." He exhaled. "On October 17th, 2014, you and I were at Lake Geneva. Your father found us." I gripped the phone. "Why?" "Because he didn't want you seeing me." "Why?" "Because he knew something about you." "What?" Daniel's voice became quieter. "Something he had done." My stomach tightened. "What did he do?" "I can't tell you over the phone." "Why?" "Because your father wasn't the only person who knew." I stared at the notebook. "Who else?" "Your mother." I closed my eyes. Of course, my parents. Both of them. And somehow Daniel was caught between them. I whispered, "What happened at the lake?" Daniel didn't answer. "Daniel, I tried to save you." My chest tightened. "You said I died." "I thought you did." "Then what happened?" A long silence. Then, "Your father found you unconscious in the water." I remembered the cold, the darkness, a man's voice, but it wasn't my father's voice. It was Daniel's. "Stay with me, Emma." My eyes filled with tears. I could hear him saying it, not through the phone. Inside my memory, Daniel continued, "Your father told everyone you fell." I whispered, "But that's not what happened." "No." "What happened?" His voice broke slightly. "He pushed you." Couldn't breathe. The apartment seemed to tilt around me. "My father pushed me?" "Yes." "Why?" "I don't know." "You're lying." "I'm not." "Then why did he do it?" "I don't know." I looked at the notebook. The pages suddenly seemed heavier. My father had written, "I don't think she should. If anything happens to me, I don't believe him." I whispered, "What happened to my memory?" Daniel went silent. "Daniel." "Emma. There's something you need to understand." "What?" "You didn't forget me naturally." My blood went cold. "What does that mean?" "Your mother had someone alter your medical records." I stared at the wall. "Why?" "Because she wanted everyone to believe you had brain damage from the accident." My voice barely worked. "But I did have memory problems." "Yes." "Then what are you saying?" Daniel's voice became almost a whisper. "You weren't supposed to remember anything about me." I looked at the photograph in my hand, the one of us beside the lake, then at my father's notebook, and finally at the envelope downstairs, the one I'd been warned not to open. "Daniel." "Yes." "What's inside the envelope?" He didn't answer. My stomach sank. "Daniel." Finally, he said, "Proof." "Proof of what?" "That your father didn't push you into the lake." I went completely still. "What?" Daniel breathed slowly. "Emma, I need you to listen carefully." "Okay." "Your father was there." "Yes." "He lied about what happened." "Why?" "Because he was protecting someone." "Who?" Daniel didn't answer. Then he said, "Me." I stared into the darkness of my apartment. The man I had spent the entire day believing was my enemy had just told me my father had protected him. And suddenly, the story I thought I was uncovering began to look completely different. I went downstairs. I opened the glove compartment. The envelope was still there. I held it in my hands. Then my phone buzzed. Not Daniel this time. My mother's number. One message. "Emma, whatever you do, don't believe Daniel." I stared at it. Then another message appeared. "He knows what happened to your father." My heart stopped, because Daniel had already told me something else. Something my mother apparently didn't know. He said my father had protected him. I looked down at the envelope. There was only one thing left to do. I opened it. Inside was a single photograph. And the moment I saw it, I understood why my mother had spent 10 years trying to make me forget. Chapter 5. The photograph that changed everything. The photograph inside the envelope was not a picture of me and Daniel. It was a picture of my father. I stared at it under the harsh fluorescent light of the parking garage, trying to understand what I was seeing. Richard Carter stood beside a black SUV. The picture had been taken at night. There was snow on the ground, though not much. A street lamp illuminated half his face, leaving the other half in shadow. He looked younger than I remembered. Not happy, not frightened, angry, but that wasn't what made my hands start shaking. It was the person standing beside him. Daniel, except he wasn't 17. He looked almost exactly as he did now. Same dark hair, same gray-blue eyes, same expression. I turned the photograph over. Nothing. No date. No explanation. Just a small handwritten number in the corner. 17. I looked at it again. Then I noticed something else. In the background, behind my father and Daniel, was a building. I knew that building. My father's old house. The house where I'd spent most of my childhood. The house my mother sold after his death. I zoomed in with my phone camera. There was a figure standing behind an upstairs window. A girl. My heart stopped. I zoomed in again. It was me, 17 years old, watching my father and Daniel from the window. I looked at the picture in horror. I remembered that house. I remembered my bedroom. I remembered the window, but I didn't remember Daniel standing outside. I didn't remember my father meeting him. I didn't remember anything. Then I noticed the time written beneath the photograph. 11:42 p.m., October 17th. I looked at the date again. The night of the accident. The same night my father supposedly found me unconscious at Lake Geneva. The same night Daniel claimed my father had pushed me. But this photograph showed something else. My father and Daniel had been together that night. After the accident. Or before it. Couldn't tell. I immediately called Daniel. He answered on the first ring. Emma, where was this taken? Silence. I sent him the photograph. The message showed delivered. Then read. His breathing changed. Where did you get that? Answer me. Emma, you shouldn't have that. Where was it taken? My father's house. I frowned. Your father's? Yes. I looked at the photograph. Why were you there? Daniel didn't answer. Daniel, I was looking for you. At my house. Yes. Why? Because you had disappeared. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? You weren't at the lake anymore. I sat down on the concrete floor beside my car. Then where was I? I didn't know. You're telling me you went to my house? Yes. And my father was there? Yes. Why? Daniel was quiet. Because he was looking for me. The pieces weren't fitting. They weren't even close. Daniel, my father hated you. I know. Then why would he be looking for you? Because he needed me. For what? Another silence. I stood. Stop doing that. Doing what? Deciding what I can handle. Emma, I've spent 10 years believing I had a childhood memory problem. I've spent 2 days discovering that my mother lied to me. My father lied to me. And you apparently know half my life better than I do. My voice cracked. You're not protecting me anymore. Daniel didn't say anything. Tell me everything. His breathing was audible through the phone. Finally, he said, Okay. I waited. Your father didn't push you into the lake. I closed my eyes. I know. No, you don't. What does that mean? Your father found you after you fell. I opened my eyes. Then why did you say he pushed me? I said that's what I thought happened. You said it like you knew. I knew he was there. That's not the same thing. No. Then what happened? Daniel hesitated. You jumped. My entire body went cold. I what? You jumped. Why? I don't know. You were there. I wasn't there when it happened. Then how do you know? Because your father told me. I stared at the photograph. Why would I jump? I don't know. Daniel, this isn't helping. I know. Then tell me something that does. His voice softened. Do you remember the red door? I stopped. A strange sensation moved through me. Why? Just answer. I searched my memory. A red door. There was one. I had seen it in dreams. For years. A red door at the end of a long hallway. I'd always assumed it was from my childhood. Sometimes I dreamed I was standing in front of it. Sometimes I dreamed someone was knocking from the other side. but I'd never been able to open it. I remember it. Daniel went silent. Daniel, you remember? Yes. His voice became barely audible. Then it's starting. What is the rest of it? I hated how afraid I felt. Tell me about the door. I can't. Why? Because if you remember what was behind it, you'll remember why you jumped. I gripped the phone. Maybe I want to remember. No. The firmness in his voice startled me. Why? Because the last time you remembered, your father died. My blood turned cold. What does that mean? I need to see you. I almost laughed. Absolutely not. Emma. No. You show up outside my apartment. You know my name before we supposedly meet. You send photographs into my life. And now you're telling me I'm going to remember why I jumped off a cliff 10 years ago. It wasn't a cliff. That's your defense? I'm trying to keep you alive. From what? He went quiet. Then, from whoever took that photograph. I looked down at it. Who took it? I don't know. Who was with my father? I don't know. Who gave it to me? I don't know. Then what exactly do you know? Daniel took a slow breath. I know someone has been watching you for 10 years. The garage suddenly seemed colder. Why? Because they thought you'd remember. Remember what? Where your father hid it. My heart skipped. Hid what? Evidence. What evidence? Evidence that proves your father wasn't responsible for what happened to you. I looked at the photograph. Then who was? Daniel didn't answer. Daniel. I don't know. I was beginning to hate those words. Then why are you so afraid? Because I know what happened after the accident. What? They came for you. I stopped. Who? I don't know. Daniel. I never saw their faces. How many? 3. My stomach tightened. What did they want? You. The words seemed to echo around the parking garage. Why? Because your father had something they wanted. Evidence. Yes. What kind? Daniel hesitated. Then he said, a recording. I stared at him. What recording? Your father recorded a conversation. With who? With the people who were responsible. Responsible for what? Emma, please. No. My voice shook. I'm done with please. I wiped my eyes. Tell me. Daniel was silent for so long that I thought he'd hung up. Then he said, your father discovered that someone had been manipulating your medical records. My chest tightened. What? Your diagnosis after the accident wasn't real. I couldn't speak. Your father found out you hadn't suffered the kind of brain injury everyone claimed. I leaned against the car. Then why couldn't I remember? Because someone made sure you wouldn't. How? I don't know. Daniel. I don't know. His voice broke. Then he lowered it. But your father knew. I stared at the photograph. My father. The man I had spent 8 years remembering as complicated but loving. The man my mother had suddenly told me to fear. What had he discovered? What happened to the recording? Daniel said nothing. Daniel, I think you have it. I laughed bitterly. Where? That's what we're trying to remember. I stopped. We. You and me. Why me? Because you were there. Where? At the red door. My heart began pounding. I saw it again. The hallway. The red door. A man's voice. My father's voice. And another voice. Daniel's. Except this time, I remembered something else. A fourth voice. A woman. I couldn't understand her words, but I recognized the sound. I knew that voice. My blood ran cold. Daniel. Yes. I remember someone else. He went silent. A woman. His breathing stopped. Daniel. Don't. Who was she? Emma. Don't try to remember. Why? Because you know her. I stared at the photograph. My fingers slowly loosened. The picture slipped from my hand. Who is she? Daniel didn't answer. I already knew. Not because I remembered her face. Because I remembered her voice. Soft. Familiar. The same voice that had told me for 10 years that my accident was just an accident. The same voice that had warned me not to go to Lake Geneva. The same voice that had begged me not to trust Daniel. My mother's. I whispered, "It was Mom." Daniel said nothing. That silence confirmed everything. I stepped away from the car. She was there. Yes. At the red door? Yes. She knows what happened. Yes. She knows what happened to Dad. Yes. My eyes filled with tears. And she knows you. Daniel's silence returned. I stared at the photograph. How long? What? How long has my mother known you? Daniel didn't answer. I felt something inside me collapse. Daniel, since before you met me. The words hit harder than anything else. Before I met him. Before the lake. Before the accident. Before I forgot him. My mother had known Daniel. Maybe she'd known him for years. I looked toward the exit of the parking garage. Car had just entered. Black SUV. My heart stopped. It rolled slowly toward me. Daniel suddenly said, "Emma, where are you?" I couldn't answer. The SUV stopped. The driver's window lowered. I couldn't see the driver's face. Then my phone buzzed. A text message from my mother. "Come home. We need to talk." I looked at the SUV, then at the message. And then another text appeared. Not from my mother. From Daniel. "Emma, do not go home." I stared at the two messages. One from my mother. One from Daniel. Both telling me where not to go. The driver's door of the SUV opened. A man stepped out. He wasn't Daniel. He was older. Maybe 60. Gray hair. Dark coat. And when he looked directly at me, I recognized his face. Not from memory. From the photograph. He had been standing behind my father. The third person at the house. The man who had been watching from the shadows. He raised one hand. Not a weapon. A photograph. Then he called my name. Emma. I couldn't move. He smiled and said, "Your mother has been waiting 10 years for you to remember me." Chapter 6. The man in the parking garage. For one terrible second, I couldn't move. The man stood beside the black SUV with the photograph raised between two fingers. He wasn't threatening me. That somehow made it worse. He looked completely calm. Like he knew exactly how this conversation was going to go. Like he'd rehearsed it. "Emma," he said again. My phone was still pressed against my ear. Daniel was saying something. I couldn't hear him anymore. Everything around me seemed distant. The hum of the fluorescent lights. The tires of the SUV. The elevator somewhere behind me. Even my own breathing sounded like it belonged to somebody else. The older man lowered the photograph. "You're Richard Carter's daughter." It wasn't a question. I swallowed. "Who are you?" He smiled. "That's the first question you should have asked." I took one step backward. He noticed. His expression softened. "Don't be frightened." I almost laughed. A strange man had appeared in my parking garage holding a photograph from 10 years ago, claimed to know my mother, and somehow knew my name. "You're not exactly making that easy." He glanced at my phone. "Daniel." My blood ran cold. The voice in my ear suddenly became clear. "Emma, get in your car." I looked at the man. He heard Daniel's voice. His expression changed. Not fear. Recognition. "He's still trying to protect you." I tightened my grip on the phone. "How do you know Daniel?" The man looked toward the entrance of the garage, then back at me. "Because I was there the night you disappeared." My stomach dropped. "I didn't disappear." He looked at me almost sadly. "That's what they told you." I stared at him. "Who are you?" "My name is Thomas Vale." The name meant nothing. Then he said, "Your father and I worked together." I frowned. "My father was an architect." Thomas nodded. "He was." "Then how did you know Daniel?" He didn't answer. I felt anger rising through the fear. "Everybody keeps telling me half a story. I'm done with that." Thomas smiled faintly. "That sounds like your father." I stepped closer. "What happened to him?" His expression changed. For the first time, I saw something resembling guilt. "He trusted the wrong person." "Who?" Thomas looked directly into my eyes. "Your mother." The words hit me even though I already suspected them. I shook my head. "No. You're allowed to believe that. She loved him. She did. She wouldn't hurt him. Thomas looked down at the photograph. Love doesn't make people harmless. Daniel's voice came through the phone. Emma, don't listen to him. Thomas smiled. Daniel always says that. I stared at him. Why? Because he knows what happened when I told him the truth. What truth? Thomas looked at me. You weren't supposed to survive. My entire body went cold. I heard Daniel inhale sharply through the phone. Thomas continued. That night at Lake Geneva, your father believed you were dead. I shook my head. I survived. Yes. Then what do you mean? I mean your father didn't know. I stared at him. What didn't he know? That you woke up. The garage seemed to disappear around me. I remembered darkness, water, cold, then a light, a ceiling, a voice, not my father's, a woman's. Stay still, sweetheart. I pressed my fingers against my temple. A headache exploded behind my eyes. Thomas noticed. Don't force it. I glared at him. Who was the woman? He didn't answer. Thomas. His eyes shifted toward the phone. Ask Daniel. I looked at the screen. Daniel was still connected. Daniel. His voice was quiet. Emma, come home. I almost laughed. That's what my mother said. Because she's scared. Of you. Of what you'll remember. I looked at Thomas. Is he telling the truth? Thomas shook his head. Daniel has never told you the whole truth. Neither have you. That's why I brought this. He held up the photograph. I stared at it. What is it? Proof. Of what? That your father knew what was happening. That's not enough. Thomas reached into his coat. I stepped backward immediately. He stopped, then slowly removed a small black cassette recorder. My heart skipped. Your father used this. I stared at it. Old technology. A little rectangular recorder with scratches across the surface. What's on it? Thomas looked at me. Your mother's voice. My stomach turned. No. Yes. What does she say? Thomas hesitated. Then, she tells your father what happened to you. My fingers went numb. What happened? Thomas looked toward the SUV. Not here. I shook my head. You're not taking me anywhere. I'm not asking you to. Then what? He held out the recorder. Take it. I didn't move. Why? Because your father wanted you to have it. How do you know? Thomas's expression became almost painful. Because he gave it to me. I stared at the recorder. When? The night before he died. Everything inside me stopped. My father had died 8 years ago. If he had given Thomas the recorder the night before his death, then he'd known something was coming. What happened to him? Thomas looked away. Your mother told the police he suffered a heart attack. Did he? Thomas didn't answer. Did he? No. The word barely left his mouth. Couldn't breathe. What killed him? Thomas looked directly at me. Fear. I shook my head. That's not an answer. It is when you know what he knew. I felt tears burning my eyes. Was he murdered? Thomas said nothing. That was enough. I stepped back. My phone suddenly slipped from my hand. It hit the pavement. Daniel's voice came from the speaker. Emma. I bent down. Before I could pick it up, Thomas spoke. Don't. I froze. He pointed toward my car. There was a tiny red light blinking underneath it. My heart stopped. What is that? Thomas's face changed. Get away from the vehicle. What? Now. I stepped backward. Thomas moved quickly toward me. Then the parking garage door opened. A security cart rolled through. The driver looked at us. Thomas grabbed my arm. Don't scream. I yanked it away. Don't touch me. Emma, listen. Daniel was still shouting through the phone. Emma, get out of there. Then Thomas looked toward the ceiling. His face went pale. Too late. I heard it. A faint electronic chirp. Once, twice. Thomas shoved me behind a concrete pillar. I hit the ground. A deafening crack exploded across the garage. The black SUV's windows shattered. The security cart slammed into a concrete column. Glass flew everywhere. I screamed. My ears rang. Smoke filled the air. For a few seconds, I couldn't understand what had happened. Then Thomas grabbed my shoulder. Move! He pulled me toward the stairwell. I stumbled after him. What was that? Someone wanted the recorder. Who? Keep moving. We ran up the stairs. Behind us, alarms began screaming. People were shouting. Somebody called 911. I didn't stop until we reached the second floor. Thomas pushed open a door. We entered an empty office corridor. I bent over, trying to breathe. Thomas looked at me. Are you hurt? No. He nodded. Then I realized something. My phone. I had left it downstairs. Daniel. Thomas looked at me. What? My phone. We can't go back. Daniel is on it. He'll survive. You don't know that. Thomas's face tightened. You don't understand. Then explain. He stared at me. The device under your car wasn't meant to kill you. I felt sick. What? It was a signal. A signal for what? To tell them where you were. I stared at him. Who are they? Thomas looked toward the corridor. The people your father was afraid of. I felt a cold wave move through me. And they know I'm here? Yes. How? Thomas looked at the recorder in his hand. Because they were listening. I stared at the device. Then I noticed something. The recorder had a tiny red light. It was blinking. I pointed. Is that supposed to happen? Thomas looked down. His expression changed. No. The light blinked again. Then the recorder began playing. Static. A faint hiss. Thomas immediately tried to shut it off. I grabbed his wrist. Wait. A voice emerged from the speaker. My father's. My knees nearly gave out. Richard. I whispered. Thomas stared at me. The recording continued. My father's voice sounded exhausted. Afraid. If you're hearing this, Emma survived. I stopped breathing. Thomas closed his eyes. The recording continued. Helen will tell you that the accident was my fault. She'll tell you Daniel was responsible. Don't believe either of them. My eyes filled with tears. Then my mother's voice appeared. Clear. Close. Terrified. Richard, you don't understand what they will do. My father answered. They already tried to kill her. They didn't know she would wake up. Covered my mouth. Thomas stared at me. My mother's voice continued. She can't remember Daniel. She will. Not if we do this properly. You're talking about erasing our daughter's life. I'm talking about keeping her alive. My knees weakened. The recording crackled. Then my father said something that made my entire body freeze. Then tell me who was in the room when she woke up. Silence. My mother's breathing became audible. My father spoke again. Tell me who told her to forget. Then my mother whispered. Daniel. I stared at Thomas. No, that wasn't possible. Daniel had spent 2 days telling me he was trying to help me. He had warned me, protected me, found me, but my mother's voice had just said his name. The recording continued. My father said, You're lying. No, Daniel wasn't there. Richard, listen to me. You weren't supposed to know he survived. I stopped breathing. He survived. Who? My father continued. Where is he? My mother's voice became almost inaudible. He's with Emma. Then a sound. A door opening. A man's footsteps. And finally, a voice I recognized. Daniel. Younger. Terrified. He said only one sentence. Mr. Carter, you have to let her go. The recording ended. Silence filled the corridor. I looked at Thomas. He wouldn't meet my eyes. My voice came out as a whisper. Daniel was there. Thomas nodded. Yes. When I woke up. Yes. Then why did he tell me he wasn't? Thomas looked at me. Because he wasn't supposed to be. My heart pounded. What does that mean? Thomas's face hardened. It means the man you've been talking to isn't the Daniel you remember. I stared at him. What? He reached into his coat and pulled out another photograph. This one was newer. My breath caught. It showed Daniel standing beside my father. But Daniel looked exactly the same. Same age. Same face. Same eyes. The photograph was dated 2026. I stared at Thomas. That's impossible. Thomas nodded. That's what your father spent the last 8 years trying to prove. My hands began shaking. What is Daniel? Thomas looked toward the stairwell. Then he whispered, "That's the question your mother killed your father to keep buried." And from somewhere downstairs, my phone began ringing. Daniel was calling. But before I could move, Thomas said, "Whatever you do, Emma." He looked directly into my eyes. "Don't let him hear you remember." Chapter 7. The Man Who Never Changed. The phone kept ringing downstairs. Once, twice, 3 times. Daniel. I knew it was him without seeing the screen. I could feel it. That was the worst part. Somewhere beneath the fear, beneath the questions, beneath everything Thomas had just told me, there was still a part of me that wanted to hear Daniel's voice. That part of me knew him, or believed it did. Thomas watched my face. "Don't answer." I looked at him. "Why?" "Because if he knows you remember the recording, he'll come looking for you." "He's already looking for me." "Not like this." The phone stopped. Silence. Then it started again. I looked toward the stairwell. "What is he?" Thomas didn't answer. I stepped closer. "You said Daniel isn't the man I remember." "That's right." "Then who is he?" Thomas rubbed a hand across his face. "I don't know what to call him." "Try." "He looks like Daniel." "That's obvious." "He sounds like Daniel." "Obviously." "He remembers things only Daniel could know." My heart tightened. "Then what's the difference?" Thomas looked at me. "He shouldn't be alive." I stared at him. "Neither should I, apparently." "That's different." "How?" "You survived an accident." "And Daniel?" Thomas didn't answer. "How did he die?" "He didn't." I frowned. "You just said he shouldn't be alive." "I said the original Daniel shouldn't be alive." My pulse quickened. "The original?" Thomas nodded. I suddenly remembered the photograph. The one from 2014. Daniel at 17. Then the newer photograph. Daniel in 2026. Same face. Same age. No difference. What happened to the original Daniel? Thomas looked away. He disappeared. When? October 17th, 2014. The same night. I stepped backward. At the lake. Yes. Did he die? We never found a body. My heart began pounding. So he could have survived. Thomas shook his head. No. Then you don't know. I know. How? Because I was there. I stared at him. You keep saying that. Because it's true. Then tell me what happened. Thomas looked toward the dark stairwell. Your father found you unconscious near the lake. Daniel was gone. We searched for him for hours. Who is we? Your father. Me. Your mother. I stopped. My mother was there? Yes. At the lake? Yes. Then why did she tell me Dad was the only one who found me? Thomas gave me a sad smile. Because your mother has spent 10 years making sure you remember only what keeps you safe. I felt tears burning my eyes. Safe from what? Thomas looked at me. From the truth. The words landed heavily. I turned away. Show me the photograph again. He handed it to me. I stared at the newer image. Daniel stood beside my father. The date was written in the corner. May 6, 2026. My father had been dead for 8 years. Who took this? Your mother. I looked at him. What? She sent it to me. Why? To prove Daniel was back. Back from where? Thomas shook his head. We never knew. Then what do you mean when you say he's not the same Daniel? Thomas leaned against the wall. After the accident, you spent 11 days in the hospital. I know. Your mother told everyone you had suffered severe trauma. She said I had memory loss. You did. Because of the accident? Thomas stared at me. Not exactly. I felt a chill. What happened? You woke up remembering Daniel. My throat tightened. I did. Yes. Then why don't I remember him? Because your mother convinced the doctors to treat you. Treat me for what? Trauma. That doesn't erase memories. Thomas didn't answer. I looked at him. What did she do? She used a private doctor. Who? I don't know. Thomas. I don't know. I was getting tired of those words. Then how do you know any of this? Because your father told me. What exactly did he tell you? Thomas looked down. He told me your mother wanted to remove Daniel from your memory. Why? Because every time you remembered him, something happened. What? You became sick. I frowned. What kind of sick? Headaches, confusion, fainting. I touched my temple. I had experienced all of those things, but I'd always assumed they were unrelated. Thomas continued. Your father believed the memories were connected to something that happened before the lake. What? That's what he was trying to discover. I stared at the photograph. Something about Daniel. Yes. What? Thomas hesitated. Daniel wasn't supposed to exist. I laughed once, came out sharp and humorless. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. Thomas, I'm standing in a parking garage with a man who claims my dead father knew a person who hasn't aged in 12 years. You're going to need to do better. Thomas looked at me. You think I'm crazy. I think I'm running out of explanations. Fair enough. He took the recorder from his pocket. Your father believed Daniel was part of an experiment. My skin prickled. What kind of experiment? We don't know. Who was conducting it? Your father thought it was private. Private what? Medical research. I stared at him. On people? Maybe. On me. Thomas didn't answer. I felt sick. Why me? Because you survived. Survived what? Thomas looked toward the stairwell again. We should leave. No. Emma. No. I stepped directly in front of him. I'm done running. Thomas looked at me for several seconds. Then he nodded. All right. He sat on the floor. I sat opposite him. Tell me everything. He looked tired. For the first time, he looked less like a mysterious stranger and more like an old man carrying something heavy. Your father worked on a project he called the Atlas program. I frowned. Atlas? Yes. What was it? Your father never told me everything. Of course. He said it involved memory. I stared at him. Memory? More than memory. Thomas lowered his voice. Identity. A cold sensation moved through me. What does that mean? Your father believed memory wasn't just something stored in the brain. Okay. He thought certain memories could be transferred. I stared. Transferred? From one person to another. That's impossible. Your father thought so too. Until he met Daniel. The corridor seemed colder. Daniel was part of the experiment. Thomas nodded. Daniel was the first successful subject. My mouth went dry. Successful at what? Retaining memories that weren't his. I couldn't speak. Thomas continued. He remembered places he'd never visited. Conversations he'd never had. People he'd never met. I whispered, Me. Yes. That's why he knew my name. Partly. What does that mean? Thomas looked directly at me. Daniel didn't just remember you. He paused. He remembered being you. I stared at him. Nothing made sense anymore. I wanted to reject it, laugh at it, walk away. But the photograph was in my hand. Daniel's face hadn't changed. The memory of blue walls, the red door, my mother's voice, the lake, everything was connecting, just not in a way I could understand. I stood. Where is the lab? Thomas looked up. We don't know. Where was the Atlas program? Chicago. Where? Underground. I stared at him. That's not helpful. It's not supposed to be. Why? Because the place doesn't officially exist. My phone started ringing again. Both of us looked toward the stairs. Thomas's face tightened. That's him. I looked at him. How do you know? Because he always calls 3 times. The phone stopped. Silence. Then it rang again. Thomas whispered, That's 4. My blood turned cold. The ringing stopped. A moment later, a voice echoed from downstairs. Emma. I froze. Daniel. Thomas immediately stood. Don't answer. Daniel called again. Emma, I know you're there. I stared at the stairwell. His voice sounded exactly the same. Warm, familiar. The voice from my memories. The voice that had told me to stay awake. The voice that had said my name before we'd met. Thomas grabbed my wrist. We have to go. Pulled away. Wait, Emma. I heard footsteps. Someone was coming up the stairs. Slow, unhurried. Then Daniel appeared. He stopped when he saw us. For several seconds, nobody spoke. He looked at Thomas, then at me. His eyes settled on the recorder. Something changed in his expression. Not anger, fear, real fear. Emma, he said softly. My heart broke at the sound of his voice, because some part of me remembered him. Not the mystery, not the impossible story. Him, the boy at the lake, the man painting my walls, the person who had somehow been waiting for me across years I couldn't remember. I whispered, "Are you Daniel?" He looked at me, and for the first time I saw uncertainty in his eyes. I don't know. Thomas stepped between us. Stay away from her. Daniel ignored him. He looked only at me. Emma, please. I shook my head. You told me you loved me. His expression cracked. I did. You told me you knew how this ended. I thought I did. You told me we hadn't met yet. Daniel's eyes filled with something I couldn't identify. That part was true. I stared at him. How? He took a step forward. Thomas moved to block him. Daniel stopped. Then Daniel said quietly, "Because the first time I met you, you were 17. My throat tightened. And the second time? His eyes never left mine. You were 24. I felt the world tilt. 24. He nodded. The third time, Daniel swallowed. You were 31. I stared at him. But I'm 31. I know. My heart pounded. What are you saying? Daniel looked toward Thomas. He's been lying to you. Thomas said nothing. Daniel continued. Your memories didn't disappear. I felt a headache beginning behind my eyes. They were moved. Moved where? Daniel looked at me. Into me. The pain suddenly became unbearable. I grabbed my head. Images exploded through my mind. The red door. Lake Geneva. My father shouting. My mother crying. Daniel holding my hand. A hospital room. A blue-painted apartment. A kiss. A funeral. My own voice saying, "If I forget you, find me again." I gasped. Daniel stepped toward me. Emma. I looked at him, and suddenly I remembered the most important thing. Not the lake. Not my father. Not the Atlas program. Not the red door. Him. I remembered standing in a hospital room 10 years ago, holding Daniel's face between my hands. I remembered crying. I remembered him telling me he would find me, and I remembered what I'd said. Even if I don't remember you, Daniel had smiled through tears. Especially then. I stared at him. Tears rolled down my face. You promised. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. Yes. I whispered. How many times? He didn't answer. Daniel, how many times have you found me? His face collapsed. 4. My breath caught. 4. He nodded. 4 lives. I stared at him. The parking garage disappeared. Everything disappeared. Because suddenly I understood why he knew my name. Why he knew my apartment. Why he knew my favorite color. Why he knew things I couldn't possibly have told him. And why he'd looked at me that first night like he was seeing someone he'd lost. I whispered, "How many times have I forgotten you?" Daniel looked at me. Every time. My heart broke. Then Thomas said something that made Daniel turn pale. Emma hasn't forgotten this time. Daniel's eyes widened. Thomas looked at me. She's remembering. I touched my temple. The headache was getting worse. Daniel stepped forward. Emma, you need to come with me. Thomas grabbed my arm. No. Daniel looked at him. She'll die if she stays here. My blood went cold. What? Daniel looked directly at me. Your memories are coming back too fast. What happens if they all return? He didn't answer. I already knew the answer was bad. Then the parking garage lights went out. Complete darkness. Thomas whispered, They found us. A second later, somewhere below us, a car door slammed. Then another. Then another. 3 sets of footsteps. Coming upstairs. Daniel looked at me, and for the first time since I'd met him, he looked genuinely terrified. Emma. Yes. He reached for my hand. If you remember the red door, don't open it. I stared at him. Why? His fingers tightened around mine. Because the last time you did. He looked toward the approaching footsteps. You were the one who killed your father. Chapter 8, The Memory Behind the Door. For several seconds, I couldn't hear anything except my own heartbeat. You were the one who killed your father. Daniel's words seemed impossible. Not because I didn't believe him, because some small, terrible part of me did. A memory flashed through my mind. My father's face, his eyes wide, my hand reaching toward him. Then darkness. I pulled away from Daniel. No, he didn't try to grab me again. Emma. No. Thomas was staring at me. Neither man spoke. The footsteps below continued. Slow. Measured. 3 people. Exactly as Thomas had described. I looked toward the stairwell. Who are they? Thomas whispered. The people who have been looking for you. Why? Because they know you're remembering. I looked at Daniel. Did you know? He frowned. Know what? That I killed my father. Daniel's expression changed. Emma. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? I meant that's what you believed. I stared at him. What? You didn't kill your father. But you just said. I said you were the one who killed him. That's the same thing. No. Daniel stepped closer. There's a difference between causing someone's death and believing you caused it. I shook my head. You're confusing me. I know. Then stop. Daniel looked toward the stairwell. We don't have time. The footsteps were getting closer. Thomas grabbed my arm. There's another exit. Pulled away. Where? Through the service corridor. Daniel immediately shook his head. Too exposed. Thomas glared at him. Then you have a better idea? Daniel looked at me. Yes. I already knew I wouldn't like it. What's your idea? Trust me. I almost laughed. That's getting old. Daniel's face tightened. I know. Everyone keeps asking me to trust them while refusing to tell me the truth. I've told you more than anyone. You told me I died. You did. You told me I jumped. You did. You told me my memories were inside you. They are. And now you're telling me I didn't kill my father. Daniel looked at me. I never said you didn't. My stomach dropped. Then what happened? He didn't answer. The first man reached the landing below us. I saw his silhouette. Thomas pulled me toward a door. Now. We ran. The corridor beyond the door was narrow and dark. Thomas knew exactly where he was going. Daniel stayed behind us. I could hear footsteps entering the corridor. Someone shouted. Emma! I knew that voice. My mother's voice. I stopped. Thomas almost collided with me. Keep moving. That was my mother. I know. She's here. Yes. I turned around. Daniel grabbed my hand. Emma, don't. She knows everything. That's why you can't go to her. I pulled my hand away. I need answers. You'll get them. When? After we survive tonight. The words were so calm that I hated him for saying them. We reached a metal door. Thomas opened it. A stairwell descended into darkness. I stared down. Where does that go? Sub-basement. There's a sub-basement? Thomas gave me a grim smile. Chicago has more secrets underground than above it. We hurried down. The air became colder. The smell changed too. Damp concrete. Old metal. Something faintly chemical. At the bottom, Thomas unlocked another door. Beyond it was a long hallway. There were no windows. No signs. Just bare concrete walls and old pipes. Daniel stopped. I turned. What? He was staring at the hallway. His face had gone pale. What is it? I remember this place. Thomas cursed under his breath. I stared at Daniel. From when? He looked at me. Before the lake. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. Was this the Atlas lab? Daniel nodded. Thomas closed the door behind us. We shouldn't have come here. I looked at him. Why? Because this is where your father brought you. My heart skipped. Me? Yes. When? Before the accident. I stared down the hallway. A faint memory appeared. White walls, a glass window, a red door, and a little girl crying. I touched the wall. How old was I? Thomas didn't answer. Thomas. 17. My heart started racing. Why would my father bring me here? He didn't. I turned. Then who did? Thomas looked at Daniel. Daniel looked away. I felt anger rising again. Tell me. Daniel said quietly. Your mother. The headache returned. Sharp. Immediate. I pressed my fingers against my temple. A voice entered my mind. My mother's voice. Emma, you have to trust me. Then my father's. Helen, she's our daughter. Then Daniel. Don't let them open the door. I stumbled. Daniel caught me. Easy. Pushed him away. Don't touch me. He stopped. I looked down the hallway. At the very end was a door. Red. My breath caught. Daniel whispered. No. I stared at it. That's it. Thomas's expression changed. What's it? The door. Daniel stepped in front of me. Emma, don't. I've seen this. I know. In my dreams. I know. Why? Daniel's voice was barely audible. Because you were here. I moved toward it. He blocked me. Get out of my way. Please. Daniel. You don't want to remember what's behind it. You don't get to decide that. You're right. He stepped aside. That surprised me. I walked forward. One step. Then another. My heartbeat grew louder. The red door seemed to pull me toward it. I reached for the handle. Thomas said my name. I didn't stop. I opened the door. And remembered. Not everything. Just enough. A room. White walls. A single chair. A large glass window. My father standing behind it. My mother beside him. And Daniel sitting in the chair. Except he wasn't the Daniel I knew. He looked terrified. He was 17. I was standing outside the room. My father was talking. Daniel, tell her. Daniel looked at me through the glass. Tell her what? My father pointed toward a monitor. Tell her what you remember. Daniel shook his head. I remember everything. My mother whispered. That's the problem. I remembered walking into the room. I remembered touching Daniel's face. I remembered crying. Why do you know me? Daniel looked at me. Because I've been dreaming about you. My father said. Not dreaming. Daniel looked at him. Then what? My father looked toward me. Memory. The scene shifted. I was older. 24. Standing in the same room. Daniel was there again. Same face. Same age. I heard myself screaming. Where is the real Daniel? He looked at me. I am Daniel. No. I remembered striking him. I remembered crying. Then I remembered kissing him. The memory changed again. I was 31. Now, standing in this exact hallway. Daniel beside me. My father was older. Tired. Afraid. He handed me something. A small silver key. He said, if anything happens to me, don't let your mother find this. I remembered taking it. Then my mother appeared. She was furious. Richard. My father turned. Stay away from her. My mother looked at me. Emma, come with me. I backed away. No. Her expression changed. Emma, you don't understand. I understand enough. My father stepped between us. Then the memory became chaotic. Daniel shouting. My mother crying. My father grabbing my arm. Me pulling away. The silver key falling. A door opening. The red door. And then I remembered the truth. I hadn't killed my father. I had pushed him away. He had fallen. His head struck the corner of a metal table. Blood. My scream. My mother's face. Daniel running toward him. And my father, barely conscious, whispering, don't let her remember. I opened my eyes. I was on the floor. Daniel was kneeling beside me. Thomas stood behind him. Couldn't breathe. My father hadn't been murdered. He had died because of me. But there was more. Something I hadn't remembered yet. I looked at Daniel. Why did Dad say, "Don't let her remember"? Daniel's eyes filled with tears. Because he knew what would happen if you did. What? He reached into his coat. Slowly. Then he pulled out a small silver key. My heart stopped. I recognized it. The key from my memory. You kept it. Daniel nodded. Your father gave it to me. Why? Because you forgot where you put it. I stared at the key. What's it open? Daniel looked at the red door. Not that. Thomas suddenly turned toward the hallway. What? We heard something. A door closing. Then footsteps. My mother. She was coming. Daniel grabbed my hand. There's a room behind the red door. I looked at him. What? A second room. Where? Behind the wall. Thomas stared at him. How do you know? Daniel looked at me. Because Emma and I hid something there. My heart began racing. What? A recording. Of what? Daniel's fingers tightened around mine. Your mother telling us why she erased your memory. The footsteps grew louder. Then my mother's voice echoed down the corridor. Emma. I froze. Daniel whispered. There's one thing you need to know before she reaches us. What? His eyes met mine. Your mother didn't erase your memories to protect you. I stared at him. Then why? Daniel looked toward the approaching footsteps. She erased them because you remembered who she really was. And then the red door behind us slowly opened by itself. Chapter 9, the first time we met. The red door stood open. For 10 years, I had dreamed about what was behind it. I had imagined a monster, a secret laboratory, my father's body, a room full of photographs, something terrible enough to explain why my mother had spent so long telling me to forget. But when I finally stepped through it, there was nothing frightening inside. Just a small room, a wooden desk, an old tape recorder, and a box sitting beneath the window. Daniel stopped beside me. That's it, he whispered. I looked at him. That's what? The truth. My mother stood in the doorway behind us. She looked exhausted, older than she had that morning. Emma, she said softly. I turned. Don't tell me what to remember. Her eyes filled with tears. I won't. Don't tell me what to believe. She nodded. I won't. Just tell me the truth. My mother looked at Daniel, then at Thomas. Finally, she looked at me. Your father wasn't murdered. My breath caught. Then what happened? She swallowed. Your father died because of me. Daniel moved slightly, but I raised my hand. I needed to hear this. My mother continued. After the accident, your father discovered that the Atlas research had gone too far. Daniel's memories were becoming connected to yours. You were remembering things that happened to him, and he was remembering things that happened to you. I looked at Daniel. So that's why he knew me. Yes. Before we met? My mother nodded. Daniel had memories of you before he actually met you. Daniel looked at me. I dreamed about you first. I remembered that. The hospital. His frightened face. The strange feeling that I knew him even when I didn't. My mother continued. Your father wanted to shut everything down. I wanted to protect you. You erased my memories. I did. Her voice broke. I thought if you forgot Daniel, you'd be safe. I stared at her. And Dad. He tried to stop me. My mother looked toward the floor. At the lake, you and your father argued. He was trying to take you away. You pulled away from him. He fell. I closed my eyes. The memory came back. Not as a nightmare this time. As a moment. Terrible, ordinary moment. My father losing his balance. Me reaching for him. Daniel running toward us. My mother screaming. My father had not been murdered. I hadn't murdered him either. It had been an accident. But my mother had been so terrified of the truth that she'd allowed me to believe something worse. What happened afterward? I asked. You woke up in the hospital, she said. And you remembered Daniel. Daniel lowered his eyes. You were terrified, my mother continued. You kept asking for him. I looked at him. Why didn't you let me see him? Because I believed the memories were hurting you. She took a breath. I was wrong. That simple admission somehow hurt more than an excuse would have. I looked at the box beneath the desk. What's in there? My mother didn't answer. Daniel walked toward it. He opened the lid. Inside were photographs. Dozens of them. My childhood. My father. My mother. And Daniel. I picked one up. Daniel and I were sitting beside a lake. We were 17. I was laughing. He was looking at me, not at the camera. At me. I turned it over. There was handwriting on the back. Mine. He makes me feel like I've known him forever. My eyes filled with tears. Another photograph. Daniel and me at 24. Another at 27. Another at 30. Different years. Same person. Same eyes. Same strange familiarity. Daniel watched me. I found you every time. I looked at him. How? He smiled sadly. I don't know. That's not an answer. I know. He sat beside me. Every time I saw you, something inside me recognized you. Sometimes you remembered me immediately. Sometimes it took months. Once you didn't remember me at all. What did you do? I stayed away. Why? Because you were happy. My heart tightened. You could have come back. I wanted to. Then why didn't you? He looked at me. Because loving someone isn't always about getting what you want. I couldn't stop the tears. That's incredibly annoying. He smiled. I've been told. I laughed. And suddenly, the room didn't feel frightening anymore. The past was still painful. My father was still gone. My mother had still lied. Years had still been lost. But I wasn't trapped inside those years anymore. I turned toward Daniel. One thing still bothers me. What? The photograph. He frowned. Which one? The one you gave me at the coffee shop. He looked confused. The one that showed us together. That was real. How did you have a photograph from the future? Daniel smiled. I didn't. I stared at him. Then what was it? An old photograph. I frowned. No. Yes. You told me it was from the future. I told you the date wasn't written on it. I stared at him. Then I realized. The photograph wasn't proof of the future. It was proof of a possibility. He had simply known we'd find our way back to each other. I shook my head. You are unbelievably dramatic. I prefer romantic. You're both. He laughed. Then he became quiet. Emma. Yeah. I need to tell you something. My stomach tightened. What? He took my hand. The first night I saw you outside that coffee shop, I was terrified. I looked at him. You didn't look terrified. I was. Why? Because I'd spent years wondering if you'd ever remember me. I squeezed his hand. And then you turned around. His eyes softened. And you said my name. I frowned. I did. Daniel nodded. You said, Daniel? I searched my memory. Nothing. I don't remember. He smiled. That's okay. He leaned closer. Because this time you don't have to remember. I looked into his eyes. Why? Because you know me now. Something inside my chest softened. He was right. For the first time, I wasn't choosing Daniel because of an old memory. I wasn't choosing him because my father had written his name in a notebook. I wasn't choosing him because some strange connection had brought us together. I was choosing him because I knew him. Now, I reached up and touched his cheek. Daniel. Yes. I think I finally understand. What? Why you knew my name before we met. His smile appeared. Tell me. I leaned closer. Because somewhere along the way, we had already found each other. His eyes became glassy. That's pretty good. I know. He laughed. Then he kissed me. It wasn't dramatic. There were no flashing lights. No mysterious messages. No hidden doors. Just Daniel. Just me. And for the first time in years, the future didn't feel like something waiting to happen to me. Felt like something I could choose. 6 months later, I moved out of Chicago. Daniel came with me. We found a small house near Lake Geneva. I almost laughed the first time he showed me the place. Seriously? What? Of all the places in America? He grinned. I thought we'd take back the lake. So we did. We painted the living room blue. Daniel complained. I reminded him that I had always liked blue. He said that wasn't what he remembered. I told him he was welcome to sleep outside. He painted the walls himself. My mother visited the following spring. We sat together on the porch. It wasn't perfect. There were still difficult conversations. There were still days when the past hurt. But she was trying. So was I. And sometimes that's what healing looks like. Not forgetting. Just learning how to live without being ruled by what happened. On our first anniversary, Daniel took me back to the coffee shop where everything had started. The same awning, the same street, the same corner where he'd disappeared into the rain. We stood outside together. He looked at me. Do you remember? I smiled. Everything important. That's not the same thing. No. I slipped my hand into his. Better. He smiled. Then he said the words that once terrified me. You're going to miss your train, Emma. I laughed. I'm not taking the train. I know. Then why did you say that? Daniel looked at me. Because that's what I said the first time. I squeezed his hand. That wasn't the first time. He smiled. No. I shook my head. The first time was when you found me. And when was that? I looked into his gray-blue eyes. Before I knew your name. He kissed my forehead. And we walked away together. No warnings. No secrets. No mysterious photographs waiting in the dark. Just two people who had lost each other more than once. And somehow found each other again. I used to think the most impossible thing about Daniel was that he knew my name before we met. Now I know the truth. Sometimes love arrives before we understand it. Sometimes the heart recognizes someone before the mind can explain why. And sometimes the person who feels like a stranger is simply someone you've been waiting your whole life to remember. That night, as we drove home beside the quiet lake, Daniel reached across the center console and took my hand. I looked at him. He smiled. And this time, when he said my name, there was no mystery behind it. No warning. No fear. Just love. Emma. I smiled. Daniel. And for the first time, it didn't feel like we were meeting. Felt like coming home. The end.